Judges is one of my favorite books in the Bible. And this tends to surprise a lot of people because I'm a big hippie at heart. And Judges is this book that's filled with a lot of violence and death and destruction, but it is also chock full of examples of God calling unlikely people. It's a powerful reminder of God's special presence with and provision for those who tend to be dismissed and overlooked. And so the story I'll share with you today involves one of those unlikely leaders named Gideon. When Judges first introduces us to Gideon, he isn't quite convinced about God's call on his life, asking God to constantly prove God's self. And many of us probably resonate with that idea that, God, I'm not super convinced, so I just need you to reassure me maybe seven different times. But during this story, Gideon has gained some confidence and is more readily able to heed God's direction. And God directs him in a pretty bizarre way. You see, Gideon and his troops were about to enter into battle against countless Midianites. But God tells Gideon to send almost all of his troops home. The Israelites were already outnumbered, but God tells Gideon, send most of them home until only 300 remain against this sea of Midianites. And God tells Gideon to lead these 300 into battle in a fascinating way. Judges 7:15 through 18 says this. Gideon said, get up, for the Lord has given the army of Midian into your hand. After, he divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and put trumpets into the hands of all of them, and empty jars with torches inside the jars. He said to them, look at me and do the same. When I come to the outskirts of the camp, do as I do. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, then you also blow the trumpets around the whole camp and shout, for the Lord and for Gideon. God tells Gideon to go into battle with a jar with a torch inside in one hand and a trumpet in the other. You know what that leaves no hands free for? Weapons. This is a risky plan. They are basically unarmed. But here's how it worked. You see, these 300 men, because there were so few of them, were able to quietly surround the enemy camp. And all at once, 300 torches appear as the jars are smashed and 300 trumpets sound. The sudden light and sound made it seem like this massive army had come out of nowhere to surround the Midianites. And so alarmed and confused, the Midianites, they start attacking each other. And so without even drawing a sword, Gideon and his men win this battle. The Midianites basically defeat themselves. So what do we learn from this war strategy from thousands of years ago? First, I'll name the obvious. Gideon and the troops had to have some pretty incredible faith to even attempt what God was telling them to do. But it's even more than that, because what did their faith ultimately demand from them? It demanded their vulnerability. Vulnerability can be a terrifying thing, especially right now. Many of us look at the state of the world, and the only way we can keep going is by arming ourselves with barbed humor and memes, and there's nothing wrong with this. It's a survival strategy. And if we walked around revealing our hearts and souls to everyone all the time, we would collapse under the emotional weight of it all. But it is important to remember the value of letting our guard down sometimes. When's the last time you talked to a friend and didn't respond with a too quick, everything's good, when they asked you how you're doing? Have you let yourself have a good cry recently, or taken it all out on a punching bag? When's the last time you let yourself be truly vulnerable? And whenever that might have been, did you view that vulnerability as a strength or as a weakness? Because even when we know that we need to be vulnerable, we tend to view it as a weakness, something that somebody could exploit to hurt us if they were feeling particularly malicious. So today I want to remind you that vulnerability is strength. For Gideon and his troops, their vulnerability quite literally toppled thousands upon thousands of Midianites. And yours, it might not bring a notable military victory, but I have no doubt that God will do something incredible with it, especially if you have the faith that God's got your back when you dare to be vulnerable. Amen.